But we have Brant Jordan with us tonight, and he is a missionary, him and his wife, who she looks like a teenager. She just looks like a child bride. And they are missionaries in Togo. And so we invited him to share with us a little bit about what God is doing in his part of the world, and so that we're aware we can know how to pray for them too. So we're so excited. We want to welcome you tonight.
Thank you, Pastor. It is an honor to be here, and we have been faithfully supported a number of years through Livestream has faithfully supported us. And so I want to begin by saying thank you. Thank you for your faithful giving to missions through Faith Promises, and you guys do Faith Promises, is that right? Okay. All right. Some churches do, some churches don't, and I was trying to keep track of that you guys do. So, it's such a wonderful privilege to give to missions. And let me encourage you that it is really life-changing. My wife and I have been giving to support missionaries really before we began and before we ever applied in missions, and I don't know how many missionaries that we personally support out of our own budget, not our work budget, but our personal budget. And why do we do that? Because we believe in missions, and I guarantee you, Brian and Renee, same thing. All the missionaries I know, we all support each other. We feel sorry for each other, pick each other up. So anyway, but thank you guys for having us. So. Let me begin just by telling you a little bit. So it's for some reason we are at the West Africa Advanced School of Theology. It's your TV. Well, anyway, there's a Y there. So, but we work at the West Africa Advanced School of Theology. This is actually at the school, just over a little bit east of our house. You can go to the next slide. So wow, aren't those good-looking grandsons? So those are my 4 grandsons. In the middle there is my son. He works in Ethiopia with Samaritan's Purse. And then my daughter and son-in-law up there with all those grand boys. I tell you, they are real stinkers. Good boys. So you can go to the next slide. So this is Togo. So you can see kind of a little greenish, narrow country. That's Togo. That's where we work. We're right on the coast, so right at the bottom by the ocean. And our school is based there, but we have students that come from 22 different nations in Africa to all come to our school. We have a fantastic library. So your daughter, Ruby, would be thrilled about this. Do you remember the old CBC, Central Bible College? That library, we have the majority of it now at our school. And literally, we have probably the largest library on the continent of Africa of any type. So it's an amazing library full of just all sorts of scholarly works. And so students come from all over to come to our school. They are pastors and leaders. They're church planters. They are district superintendents. They are national superintendents from different countries that come for training at our school. So you can go see the next slide. Oh, that's okay. All right, yeah. Freezing up. Wait. Yeah. Not going to help. All right, so, okay. While he's bringing that up, I'll tell you what all throughout Africa, we have a great big goal. Our goal is to plant healthy churches within walking distance of every African. Plant a healthy church. However, my wife and I, other than occasionally when we get asked to help with a church plant, we actually don't plant churches. We have helped with some church plants. So what do? We believe that the answer to great, healthy churches is Spirit-filled, biblically trained leaders. The church will never rise above its leadership. And if you have leaders that are confused or unstable or their doctrine's not clear, they're not passionate about the work of God, the mission of God, there we go, right there. There's my graduates from last year. So actually it was 2 years ago. So this was a little bit smaller class. I think it was only about 115 there. But anyway, but we've had up to 160. You can see our guest professors, our missionaries, different church national leaders. Anyway, and then our students, and these are they earned their bachelor's, BTH, bachelor's in theology, or a master's in theology, and they are there for training and transformation. Amen. And it's so powerful. So tonight I'm going to share for the next about 20 minutes, 25 minutes, no, 15 minutes, sorry. About the next 15 minutes, I'm going to try to help us to understand what we aim for when we teach at WAST. WAST is West Africa Advanced School of Theology. You can go on the next slide there. You can just see some of our students. These guys got their master's degree, and then you can go to the next one there. And these guys got their bachelor's. Oh, I tell you, Cephas is the guy on the left. He was so excited. Cephas, what we would call Cephas. So excited. And this guy, excuse me, the guy beside Cephas, brilliant students. And these guys, they come to us. They are not 18, 19 years old. They are 20, 25, 30, sometimes 40-year-old pastors coming to us for training. And you can go to the next one, and we're going to talk real quick about transformation. How many of you guys know the story of Joseph in the Old Testament? How many of you say, I know that story? And some of you go, I don't know that story. Let me see if I can sum it up real quick. Joseph was one of 11 boys. Yeah? His dad raised these boys, and he made some critical errors. So one of the things that Joseph did was his father Jacob, he favored Joseph more than his other sons. And so if you look in chapter 37, you find out that Joseph is 17 years old. It says in verse 2, and he was tending his father's sheep, and he had these dreams. The dream was in two different forms, but basically the dream is this, is that one day Joseph will be the leader, and his entire family will bow down to them. Now, it's shocking because Joseph is the second to the youngest. And matter of fact, even his dad said, what are you talking about? Even your mother and I are going to bow down to you? And it's like, no way. Well, what happened was this. His brothers, Joseph's brothers, hated him. And so one day they decided on something. They saw Joseph coming in the distance. And you can look here in verse 19. It says, here comes the dreamer. Come on, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns. Can you imagine killing your own brother? That's what they were going to do. First, they threw him into the pit, okay? And the Bible says, it's really interesting. It says when they threw him into the pit, you know what they did? They sat down and ate their lunch. Can you imagine? You're sitting down there just eating your lunch, and he's hollering, help, help, get me out of here. And eventually they didn't just take him and throw him into the pit. They didn't kill him. Finally, one of the brothers, Judah, He was like the third or fourth. I think he's like the fourth oldest. Judah said, you know what? What are we going to gain by killing the kid? Let's sell him into slavery. We'll make a little money off of it. And that's what they did. So they sold Joseph into slavery. He's 17 years old. So, skip to chapter 41. And look at verse 46. Chapter 41, verse 46. It says, when he was 30 years old, he began serving in the court of Pharaoh. And it says that when Joseph left Pharaoh's presence, he inspected the entire land of Egypt. Basically, what happened is this. At 17 years old, he's sold into slavery. He gets thrown into prison, and several other things happen. But eventually, 13 years later, he winds up as the second in command of all of Egypt. Now, he hasn't seen his dad in all those 13 years. His dad thought he was dead. And he hasn't seen any of his brothers. But he remembered the dream. One day, your brothers will come and bow down to you. Now, once Joseph gets in charge of Egypt, for 7 years, there was great blessings in Egypt. And then after 7 years, there is 2 years of famine. So if you're keeping track of all this, we are into our 22nd year of Joseph being away from his father and away from all of his brothers. Now, something happens. Because of the famine, Joseph's brothers show up, and look at what it says. When they arrived in verse 6, since Joseph, of chapter 42, when Joseph was in charge of the governor of all of Egypt, in charge of selling the grain, and it was to him his brothers came, and when they arrived, they bowed down before him with their faces to the ground. Joseph recognized his brothers instantly, but they did not recognize him. I want you to go to the next slide. And I want you to think about this little statement I made here. Transformation happens when we surrender our dreams. It's kind of seems antithetical because many times people will say, you know what? Transformation is you set a dream and you aim for that dream so your dreams can come true. Kind of like Disney World. I think their dream is to get your money. But anyway, so... If you've ever been to Disney World, you can testify. But actually in the kingdom, it's not that all of our dreams come true. It's that we learn to surrender our dreams. See, what happens is this. Joseph is there. His brothers all show up, and they all bow down, and Joseph does nothing. He did not jump up and say, aha, I told you you were going to bow down to me. He actually didn't say anything. And what happens is this. You keep reading through here, and you get to chapter 45. He finally reveals himself. After some time of testing, he reveals himself to his brothers, and he says this. Verse 7, God sent me ahead of you to keep you and your families alive and to preserve many survivors. God sent me here. Now, these guys were the ones that betrayed him, attempted to kill him, sold him into slavery, but he said, you know what? I'm looking back now, and I see that actually it wasn't you that sent me here. It was God. You see, transformation is something that changes our way of thinking about the past. It changes our aims for the future, and it changes our relationships today and tomorrow. You know, if you go to church and you say, I've been transformed, but your relationships aren't transformed, your aims aren't transformed, and you're constantly bitter about the past, then I would submit to you, actually, you're just a good churchgoer. You actually haven't been transformed. And so this is one of the things we try to teach our students at WAST when they come, is that you have a dream of ministry, of pastoring, of church planting, evangelist, missionary, whatever it is. The secret is not grabbing for the dream. The secret is letting it go into God's hands and saying, Lord, if this happens, it's because you're in charge of it. You see, one of the things Joseph figured out, the dream was not his brothers bowing down. The dream was saving his entire family. Bowing down was really actually just a little bitty part of the dream. And it really, at this point, it's kind of funny. It meant nothing to Joseph. He didn't care. His concern was for his father and his brothers and his entire family. And he said, you know what? God sent me here to save all of our family. His view of the past had been transformed. His aims for the future had been transformed. And his relationships had been transformed. This guy right here, one of our students, he's actually in the doctoral program now, but he came to our school to get his bachelor's degree, and he was already a church planter. His name is Robert. And I was teaching. There's certain classes that, because I have an MDiv, I could teach in the master's program certain classes. And so I was teaching a missions class, and Robert was in the church planting class, which was next to mine one time. And he and his classmates came out, and I said, so what did you guys discuss today, Robert? He said, you know, our professor challenged us. Ask God how many churches you can plant in the next 2 years after you graduate. You know, he's graduating with his master's. And so I said, so what are you thinking? He said, well, we're going to go back to the dorm. We're going to pray, and then Monday we're going to give an answer. So Monday rolled around. And I see the guys all trooping up there to their class. And I said, so what did you guys decide? One of them said, oh, you know, I'm going to plant 5 churches. Another one, 3 churches, you know, whatever. I said, well, Robert, how many churches are you going to plant? He said, 50 churches. I said, in 2 years? He said, yes. I said, what did Brother Fowley, it was a professor, what did Brother Fowley say when you told him you're going to plant 50 churches in 2 years? He said, well, he said I should pray about it. I said, Robert, that's a great idea. I think you should pray about it. It's a lot of churches. So Robert's had his master's degree for quite a while. And I took this picture in July of last year, and we were standing there on the 3rd floor of the building, and I asked him, I said, so Robert, since you graduated with your master's, which would have been about 5 years ago, I said, how many churches have you planted? He said, we just planted our 73rd church. 73 churches. Wow. He said, now, not all of them have buildings, but all of them have pastors. They all meet, and they all have congregations. Most of them have buildings. That is amazing. And so that's one of the things we try to do is we really encourage the students to dream big dreams. Now, I will tell you, vast majority of all of our students do not plant 73 churches. It's very unusual. But it does show you how God can use people when we submit our dreams to Him and we say, Lord, you do what only you can do, and I submit to you. So the next thing I want to talk to you about is Transformation happens when we realize we need each other. Now, this story is a pretty cool story. I wish I could spend all my time going through it, but it would take you a few hours. Reuben is the oldest born. In the beginning, if you read in chapter 38, Reuben was the one that decided to throw Joseph in the pit. It was Reuben's idea. What it was, he was going to go back and rescue Joseph later. Now, the reason this is significant is you got to understand Reuben is the oldest brother. This is a grown man. He's probably 40 years old. Okay? The oldest brother in that context had absolute authority outside of his father. Literally, he could tell his younger brothers to do anything, and they have to do it. And this way in West Africa. It's very common. So you'll have a lady who's maybe 30 years old, and if her uncle says to her, you know, I don't like you working at that job, then she will have to quit. And she will have to get another job. Doesn't matter whether she's married or not. Doesn't matter whether she likes the job or not. And it's the same way with a guy. If it's a younger man, if his uncle or the older brother speaks up, it is the law in those families. That's the way the families work. And that's just the way it worked in those days. So Reuben, he could have stood up to all of his brothers and said, guys, this is wrong. We're not going to do this. He had the will, but he lacked the courage. And Judah was the same way. Judah, of course, didn't have the will. He's the one that said, let's just sell him and make some money off of him. Later, if you follow the story, do you know that both of these guys stand up? Now, this is 22 years later. They actually stand up for their brothers. Reuben stands up and he says, you can hold me responsible for my brothers. Judah stands up and he says, you can hold me responsible for my brothers. What happened? Well, God has a way of transforming people's hearts when they learn to submit to Him. This is one of the things we really strive to teach our students at WAS. These students here are Liberians and Ghanaians, and they're not all students. Dr. Zwagbe is a Ghanaian professor, the guy in the white. But I had them over at my house, and you can go to the next slide. This is very common. I had them over for jollof rice, which is a West African dish, really terrific West African dish. If you ever get invited for jollof rice, it's nice. So jollof rice and fried chicken, and we just had a wonderful time. And then you can see the next slide there. I think I've got one more slide with them. Nope. Okay, we got Lydia. All right, you can go back. But this is one of our things we focus on because we have students from 22 different nations. We have wealthier students and we have poorer students. We have men, we have women. And one of the things we really try to inculcate into every student is, hey, let the Spirit of God speak through your brother or your sister into your life. You see, transformation isn't just saying, wow, I hope God makes my great dreams come true. But it's also saying, Lord, I can learn from my brothers and my sisters in Christ. Be they younger, older, men, women, no matter their nationality, no matter their tribe, which is a very big thing in West Africa. Smaller tribes that are not empowered. And so we really try to foster community that says, hey, we all need each other. So I've got about 4 minutes. I'm going to go to the next slide. I'm going to tell you a little story about this great lady here. So this is Lydia. Dr. Lydia is just a terrific lady. She got her doctorates in children's ministry. She's a WAS student. She started with her bachelor's and then her master's and then went on to the Pan-African Theological Seminary and got her doctorate. She is from a country in Central Africa. So her country was at war and has been for over a decade. So she's there. She's working on her doctorate. She has her proposal written, which is about 150, 180 pages. She's got this thing, and literally war breaks out in her little village. And she spent 3 days on the floor crawling around in her house because gunfire was just going off and on, off and on, off and on. Finally, after a few days, the gunfire calmed down, and Lydia decided to go check on her friends, check on her neighbors, and to get some food. So she left her house, and she came back a few hours later. When she came back, they had broken into her house and stolen basically everything that she had of value. Her computer, her phone, her hard drives, all of her backups for her doctoral work were all gone. All of the work. And she had other than what she had in that house, she had no backups for her doctoral work. Over a year's worth of work was all gone. And she's, excuse me, she was telling me this story. She's got such a beautiful smile. And she said, you know, Brother Jordan, as I'm sitting there and I'm crying and I look in the floor and I see one little zip drive, a USB. And she said, I saw it and I was excited and then I was deflated. She said, I realized that USB is corrupted. And I had meant to throw it away. And the thieves, when they broke in, they were leaving her house and they dropped it on the floor right beside the entrance as they were running away. And she said, I saw it and I just cried and cried. And the Spirit of God spoke to me and He said, Lydia, pick up that USB. She said, but Lord, you know I have never been able to get a file off that USB. It has been corrupted since I bought it. She said, the Spirit of God spoke to me again to pick it up. And she said, you know, I didn't really believe anything. I just picked it up because I felt God telling me to. She said, but I just felt so hopeless, so dejected. And she left her house that day. She did not know she would never return because the war came back and she's been a refugee in her own country and has never been able to go back home. So she got to a distant area, to a friend's house, and she kept thinking about that USB. And she thought, you know, I should try it at least one time. But I know it won't work. She said, Brother Jordan, she's always so excited. Brother Jordan, I put the USB in and it worked. It worked. All of my files were all there and I was able to retrieve everything. And of course, you know, later she completed her doctorate. She's a brilliant scholar, godly woman. She leads children's ministry. She's like basically the district children's ministry director or a national children's ministry director in our nation. And just one example of our terrific students that we have come through WAST. And so, transformation, that's what we aim for. And our goal is to love on these students and see them grow and be transformed in Jesus' name. All right, so I think I've got like some time for questions. Like we need to end about 7:20, right? So, oh, well, we got time for just blabbing up a storm. Okay. Questions. If you don't have questions, I'll just go back to preaching. There you go. How many professors? Well, we've got our a missionary team. So there are on our team, counting our missionary kids, there's 5 kids. There are 22 altogether, so it'd be 15. And like we have a single lady, and then we have mostly pairs, units, husband, wife. But we also have a single lady on our team. So, and then we have as well, like Robert, he can come in and teach. He's a Ghanaian, and so he can come in and teach if he's invited to come and teach different courses. And so we try to really utilize our African professors that have gone up through WASP. They have their bachelor's, master's, and then some of them will go on to get their doctorates. And by the way, really cool. Let me just say, I'm not in charge of the doctoral program or anything, but it's really cool. For the first time in the history of like the world, we have a French Pentecostal doctoral degree program. Such has never existed. Really, really cool. And because, of course, we have a lot of French-speaking students who wanted to get their doctorate. You have to have a lot of books and things like this that are in French. And so that just started on campus. Really, really amazing. And some of our French Assemblies of God leaders are interested in coming and doing some training. Their pastors coming doing some training at our Pan-Africa Theological Seminary, which meets on campus. Really a cool deal. Really historical, groundbreaking. Yeah. No, they have to raise their money. Societies, um, it usually works. Education works. Sometimes you'll have somebody that actually, comes and can pay their own way. Like Cephas, he has a degree in financial, like CPA type deal. And so Cephas came and paid his own way. But most of the time, that is not the case. When they come, usually it will be they get their monies from different people and their different churches, and everybody will all come together and will pool their money to support this student coming to the school. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, that's pretty common. Communal societies, that's kind of the way they fund things. So that's whether it's immigration or whatever else, they'll say, "Hey, we want you to move to England and get a job, and then you send back money." Oh yes. Usually they will they will have an associate. They will travel back periodically, because they're not in class the whole 3 years. They're in and out of class, and they can travel back and check on their, but yeah, that's usually. Yeah, they have to have the approval of their district, of their national church to be able to come to our school. It's part of that. Yes. We mainly have West Africans and Central Africans. Um, Occasionally, like uh, Dean Hartzell is a missionary up in Senegal. He's an American missionary. He's getting his master's. He's starting this year. He'll work on his master's. Uh, I'm getting my doctorate at the Pan African Theological Seminary. So when you work with Africans all the time, sometimes it can help you if your degree is also studying with alongside of Africans. It depends on the degree, but many times it's helpful because these are your people you work with. So, context. Oh, it's not my department. I'm sorry. That's the honest truth. So I know that like the way we run the school is this, is the Togo Assemblies of God sends money in, different national churches like the Togo Assemblies of God, Ghanaian Assemblies of God, Benin Assemblies of God, all these different national churches, they send in money to support the school. All the missionaries, when you work on that campus, we send in money each month that comes out of our work budget to support the school. So when the students come, it's a minimal cost. It's not anything like you would think of in the States. But for them, it's a big cost. You got to remember sometimes when we were in Sierra Leone and we worked there, the average worker in Sierra Leone just earns $5 a day. Very poor country. And Togo's better than that. Togo, I think the average there is like $12, $15 a day. Sure.
One thing I think it's important to note, if you've been around Livestream for long, we have different kinds of missionaries come in, right? So you're going to have, like this weekend, you're going to see the Webbs who they're jungle missionaries. You're going to see missionaries that are door to door, hut to hut, that are out in the bush, that have to take trucks hours, speed the light trucks hours up into the hills and the mountains in different parts of the world. Those are great missionaries. Like they're fishermen. But then we have other kinds of missionaries that teach the fishermen how to fish. So you guys understand that saying, give a person a fish, they'll eat for a day. Teach them to fish, they'll eat for a lifetime. So Brant and his wife are not fishermen. They're training fishermen. And so you're not going to have stories of you going out in the jungle and getting shot at and people surrounding your house. Very cool. So I think it's so neat to look and see like different kinds of missionaries. But if you think of the multiplicity, the multiplication of what he's doing, so like in our minds, so when my kids go off to college, they pay tuition, and that's how that professor gets paid from their students' tuition. So we support these guys and other missionaries like you as professors, so that I'm going to guess that the mission support that you get from the States helps offset tuition, making it possible for students who would not normally be able to have that training to come. And so that's why I just wanted to kind of clarify that. Pastor Stephanie. Yeah. Yeah. He's teaching all those students to fish. And so we celebrate what you're doing. And so I asked Brant to kind of guide us in prayer, to share with us what are the needs that he has. And Brant, we're going to go ahead and sign off of Facebook.